titos and titas of Metro Manila and the Philippines who have basically gone plant crazy. And today, it's October 2, 2020. It's a Friday. We've made it to another weekend, and it's a new month. So, reason to be, I guess, more optimistic. Today, we are going to talk to someone about plant care because, I mean, it's a reality. You might say, Cito, that's not hard news. That's not serious stuff. Well, if you've had the chance to drive around Metro Manila, Tagaytay, Cavite, I haven't gone beyond that area, but excuse me, you'll discover that practically every street corner you will find someone selling plants, potted plants, small plants, big plants, etc. This backyard small-time economy has become a thriving, booming industry. In fact, it's so bad, or well, so good, that there are now plant thievery, people driving around and actually checking out your front yard or you're in front of your house if you've got some really nice plants that would sell, and they'll rip up those plants. So be careful. Anyway, we will be asking or speaking with urban gardener and journalist Layson or Layson regarding this new fad, new craze, or whatever coping mechanism of hundreds of thousands, and we'll find out how to care for what are the best plants for you to take care of. Because in a previous episode of Agenda, many of you discovered that what you took for granted as a fern this, a palm that, or whatever, or an orchid like this, you thought it was just backyard variety, only to find out they were endangered, threatened, or could be confiscated. Anyway, we will also speak, for those of you who have concerns about all of those face masks being just thrown away, disposed of carelessly, and then now we're even seeing face shields being, just dumped wherever. And you're concerned about medical waste, environment. We will speak to Marian Ledesma of Zero Waste. She's a campaigner for Greenpeace. And we'll find out regarding this and what you could do to avoid and to educate others regarding medical waste. But before that, we will be speaking with Luis Oquiñena, okay, chairman of Gawad, Kalinga, and Paulo Alcazaren, our good friend Paulo, and a fellow columnist in the Philippine Star. He's an architect and urban planner, because something that I've kind of decided on my own to give more time to is the need and the push for government and even private sector to invest more, develop more, build more urban housing, or even if it's not in the urban, in the proximity of Metro Manila, decent housing, not tenement housing, not dumps, not boxes for our less privileged Filipinos. Because, I mentioned yesterday, 3 of my friends have come down with COVID. 2 of them got COVID-19 from their drivers. And guess where their drivers live? It is in those heavily congested areas, informal settlements, and people, just take that for granted. Well, for as long as we don't give them a fair deal, a better environment, they are going to be exposed, infected, etc. And this COVID-19 pandemic isn't going to go away unless we create spaces, structures, architecture that addresses, needs with compassion and with dignity for everyone, regardless of economic stature in the country. In any case, those are our lineups, guests for today. But before that, let's go to the news, the stories from the front page of the Philippine Star. Malacanang reiterates that choosing the next House Speaker is an internal matter at the lower chamber, and and that President Rodrigo Duterte respects their decision to reject the resignation of current House Speaker and Taguig Representative Alan Peter Cayetano. For now, the President's direction is to pass the 2021 budget as soon as possible, especially because it will cover the COVID-19 response. The palace has also emphasized that the nation cannot afford to have a reenacted budget. So, okay, but incoming House Speaker, Lord Alan Velasco, is accusing Speaker Cayetano of holding the budget hostage. Velasco said in his social media accounts that instead of focusing on the work at hand, maneuverings and theatrics are delaying the passage of the budget. Velasco is set to replace Cayetano in their term sharing deal this month, a deal that was brokered by their party chairman, no less than President Duterte. Reading this news, I am suddenly reminded, and I guess, it's so true. Those who do not learn from history or from the past are bound to repeat it. You remember the term sharing agreement of two people who were leading the EDSA revolt, Cory Aquino and Doy Laurel? And Doy Laurel wanted to be the new leader of the Philippines, but he was prevailed upon, I think, by Archbishop Cardinal Jaime Cardinal Sin. And the deal was, okay, Cory muna, and then the other half, ikaw na. And we all know where that went. So now history repeats itself. So for all of you young people out there, remember those lines. Those who do not learn from the past are bound to repeat it. I'm not sure. It could have been George Santayana who wrote that. In any case, let's move on. New PhilHealth President and Chief Executive Officer Dante Gueran has ordered top officials of the agency to tender their courtesy resignation. These officials include senior vice presidents or those with salary grade 26 and above, or those earning over 100,000 pesos a month in salaries. This comes after President Duterte vowed to rid PhilHealth of corruption. Yesterday, Gueran said he is not in favor of privatizing PhilHealth, saying that this would only send the wrong signal that the government cannot do its job well. Well, matagal na po this move of making all the top officials resign has been on the table of three administrators, but the reason they could not do it, to be fair to three past presidents of PhilHealth, the reason they could not do it was because there was the civil service protection. Marami kasing batas. We have so many laws that protect people. You cannot just remove them, transfer them. There is so much legal strategies available. And then at the end of the day, it's those who are trying to introduce reforms who get massacred. And I just hope Dante Gueran gets to stay longer and does the job with the 2 years that's left in the Duterte administration. However, I just hope that Mr. Gueran will be a little more open-minded. The suggestion of privatizing parts of PhilHealth is not raising the issue or making presumptions that government can't do the job. The suggestion of privatizing parts is because specialists, experts could do a much better job with their experience, expertise, and their network. So keep an open mind, President Gueran, because it is intended to ease your burden. Sabi nga ni Lord, come, those of you who are heavily burdened, come to me. Kung tayo tumatakbo kay Lord, ikaw siguro dapat call a friend ka. Okay, and the third news for the day, And Boracay has welcomed local tourists to the island yesterday. Balita ko, 7 eh. After the reopening of the popular tourist spot, Tourism Secretary Bernadette Romulo Puyat cited the critical role of Boracay in restarting tourism. She says other tourist destinations have been hesitant to reopen to travelers. So all eyes are on Boracay to see how they will implement the standard health protocols. Puyat added that yesterday, 7 tourists from Metro Manila already arrived. Okay, it's a minimal number, but the secretary said this gradual entry will allow them to better accommodate the tourists while also implementing the health protocols. Okay, so yan po, no? That's the news from the Philippine Star. I don't know, I just have a very distracting message. One of our viewers said, I like your dog. I don't know. I don't see any dog here. Sana walang multo, no? Because all of my dogs are locked up. I'm not being mean to dogs. I have to lock them up. One is in one bathroom, one is in the roof garden, because the one thing a show like this does not want is someone walking into the picture, scratching his belly, or a dog deciding he or she wants to play with me while I'm interviewing some cabinet secretary or anyone. Okay, let's move on with the program, and we wish the Department of Tourism all the luck, all the best wishes, all our prayers go with them, because kailangan na po talagang maumpisan. And Lucky 7, Lucky 7 in Boracay from Metro Manila. Okay, our first batch of guests. First is a city planner and landscape architect. He has been involved in urban design improvements of key cities in Metro Manila and Visayas. Mapapagalitan ako nito because I know he's trying to get away from the landscape architect tag, and he's more for urban planning. That's Mr. Paulo Alcazaren. Paulo, welcome to the program.
Good morning, Cito. How are you?
Oh, I'm fine, my friend. And you? How has life been treating you?
To use the most popular word in our lexicon today, choppy.
Choppy. Okay. Better choppy than intermittent, my friend. Okay. Let's bring in our other guest, the chairman of Gawad Kalinga Community Development Foundation. He was part of the pioneering team that worked closely with volunteers and partners in 1999 to establish the first Gawad Kalinga communities. Senor Luis Oquiñena, welcome to the program.
Good morning, Cito. Buenos dias. Tinawag mo akong senior eh.
Okay, pasensya na, no? I hope I did not butcher your family name. Medyo ang hirap i-pronounce ng pangalan mo. Okay.
Good
Gentlemen.
morning, architect.
Okay. Gentlemen, I hope you heard my intro earlier. It's become something near and dear to me. I've come to realize that no one is really pushing for proper housing, more housing, decent housing for our less privileged and even for the lower middle class Filipinos. Parang puro na lang upscale, puro na lang pang mayaman. And so I wanted to, get the ball rolling by getting your inputs into this. And I'd like to start with you, Paulo. What are your thoughts on the state of affairs regarding mass housing? Because I'm coming from the Singapore experience, gentlemen, where they started with slum areas, and look what they have now. So, Paulo, if you could get the conversation going.
Well, yes, definitely we need more housing. Depending on who you get your statistics from, the backlog has always been about 5 million units in the Philippines, about 1.6 to 1.8 in Metro Manila alone. So the key shelter agencies of the government, which is now under the Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development, are targeting the provision of housing, but the output of the government so far has been in the range of 100 to 150,000 units a year. At that rate, we would never really catch up with increasing demand. So projections by NEDA would be that the backlog would be an additional 5 to 6 million in the next 10 years. So we are always catching up. So we need to prioritize housing, much like we're prioritizing infrastructure at the moment. So the build, I think should really refocus on housing as a component of the new normal. Housing and hospitals would be key to ensuring that we survive if and when the next pandemic comes.
Okay, housing and hospital. That's a good combination. Now, Luis, what is the situation on the ground? Paulo already made it clear that we'll never catch up. I mean, not at 150 a year, and then the backlog is 5 million something. What is the situation on the ground in terms of quality of life, housing, accommodation, family, etc.?
Well, the scale is just tremendous, Cito. No, you mentioned Singapore. 5 million is like the population of Singapore already, the whole of Singapore. So the scale is really massive. So unless we change fundamental approaches to how we provide shelter, in the ground, I see it's not just a technical engineering solution. We need to, I call it, socially re-engineer our approach to provision on shelter. No, hindi pwedeng tambak lang o vertical. We need to really incorporate how they live together. And nakita naman natin, no, na pag hindi mo na tayo yung community aspect ng shelter, wala yan, magiging dumpster yung mga structures na yon. Kasi sa density pa lang Sito, mahirap na siya. Kung in city yung approach, you have to socially re-engineer how you build communities into this infrastructure and add some open spaces. Mahirap mahirap for a family of 5 to live in a 4x4 footprint and then expect everybody to parang live decently and ang mobility nila, interaction nila. So on the ground, sobrang daming tao talaga, Sito. And in Gawad Kalinga communities, we try to really redesign yung with mobility in mind, and then how they really interact with each other. So nauna muna yung community building bago yung structure in terms of GK.
Okay, kasi yung sinasabi mong mobility, hindi makabiyahe because a lot of people think mobility is biyahe. Here, makagalaw, makaikot, to be able to move around in their domicile, in their houses, if you want to call them houses, or in their area. Paulo, you wanted, please go ahead. No, it's not going to be a Q&A. You were reacting, Paulo.
No. The whole point is correct. It's really, you have to build based on community and culture. In the housing development board in Singapore and the housing authority in Hong Kong, 2 exemplars of housing in the region. They actually have a department filled with sociologists who learn the lessons from community building and input it and forward that knowledge to the planners and architects that put the housing together or design the housing complexes. So it's not as if it's all a physical or engineering process of providing shelter just for the sake of being able to put them into to flats or property units.
Exactly
So
my
they learn the lesson.
Yeah, exactly my thought, Paulo, because dito, and not to be critical of the government offices or agencies or people in charge, parang ang impression ko is that in the Philippines, Luis, the attitude or the mindset is construction. Basta gumawa tayo ng mga public housing, as many as we can make, pero yung many, limited din sa budget ng particular agency. I remember in Singapore when they started the development board, they had from 1960 to 65, they set a goal. They said, I think 500,000 units ang kailangan magawa within 5 years, etc. What is wrong in the Philippines? Where should we start to, as you mentioned, Luis, re engineer ba yung sabi mo, or
Socially re-engineer.
socially re-engineer the approach for housing, for public housing?
Well, the first, I guess, mindset is stop thinking it's a relocation project. Pag nirelocate mo kasi, hindi ang iniisip mo lang matanggal dahil you're interested in this particular property or in this particular area.
Mhm.
Pag natanggal yung relocation mentality is, pag linipat natin dito sa kabila, and what kind of community, what kind of lifestyle, what kind of future will they have? Sa ngayon kasi, well, I kind of disagree with the scale. It's really, when we talk about community, it's also about local governance. And nakita natin dito in pandemic na the local needs to have a little form of leadership, not just the barangay, but the community. Pag 5,000, 8,000, 10,000 na yung dinidesign mong relocation dito, ibang usapan, syudad na yun eh. And most of our relocation sites are not really designed to become cities. It's just a relocation site. Relocate 5,000, relocate 8,000, relocate 3,000. But the parameters is really just housing. They put some schools, but the governance is not designed. The interaction of the families is not incorporated into it. So the relocation mentality has to somehow change. And,
Yeah,
and yeah,
I agree with Luis that relocation outside of the city center is never worked, and it has never worked in the last 60 years of our attempts at social housing. So in-city relocation would be the ideal, because people have to be near the places they have work or the means of livelihood. So the key would be land use planning, and the onus is really on government to consolidate enough land within Metro Manila that has connections to mass transport and the key aspect of mobility and access. So that needs to be done. It has never worked that we relocate from the center of the city as they did originally from Intramuros and Tondo to Sapang Palay in the 1960s, and in each decade since they've tried it, it's never worked. You would relocate them. There's no infrastructure. They would come back. They would sell the holdings they have in Sapang Palay or the relocation, and they're back where they started. So housing really is a very complex issue that has to do with land use planning.
Yeah, but gentlemen, both of you are correct. I will state that both of you are very correct in the sense that yung mentality na i-relocate lang natin, alisin natin, let's remove them from here because we either want to use this for other purposes or we want to sell this to somebody else. But let's be brutal about it. Are we in this mess because the beneficiaries, quote unquote, or the people who we want to have housing are treated like, wala, squatter lang yan eh, mahirap yan, second class or third class. I mean, even the Philippine National Police and the military, when I saw the houses that were constructed and provided for them in Bulacan that were grabbed by that leftist group, parang sabi ko, ano ba ito? Ang treatment, is it because of a class system, a caste system mentality that we have, which is why we treat people this way?
Well, that was the second point I wanted to raise, Ito, no? That we have to look at the homeless equal in worth and
Mhm.
dignity. Kasi
Mhm.
when we look at them na hindi sila kawawa, we build better homes na kaya din natin tayo mismo tumira. And that has been the working principle of GK. That
Mhm.
this is not just about building them homes or shelter. This is about dignity restoration, confidence building, capacity building, in fact. That yung inuwian nila disente, inuwian nila, kaya nilang magdala din ng bisita. Kaya we just don't build houses, we paint the houses. We just don't paint the houses, we ask them to landscape the houses. So beauty is very important in community building and in dignity restoration. Kasi tama ka, Sito, pag ikay pulis, uniforme, pag uwi mo, squatter, slum, ay the influence of the environment. May experience kaming ganyan eh. We,
Mhm.
early days ng GK, we built in Caloocan, Bagong Silang. We built a few houses lang. Napaganda namin.
Mhm.
Pero dahil it was surrounded by a sea of squatter, in less than a few months na bumalik yung pagka-squatter naging colorful squatter yung mga bahay namin.
Mhm.
So we needed to really build a critical mass para magkakatulungan talaga yung setting the standard, and we realized na unti-unti nagbabago din yung kapaligiran. No,
Mhm.
we
Yep.
needed to, kaya wala, na-overwhelm ng environment pag hindi mo i-approach as a holistic solution.
Well,
Okay.
I agree with Luis about the overwhelming situation, and the fact of the matter in Metro Manila with 15 million population is as much as one third of the population live in bad housing, and so maybe 3 or 4 million Filipinos in Metro Manila, citizens in Metro Manila, are in informal settlements. That's 1 million dwelling units that we need to provide as better social housing. 1 million units is what the entire Singapore has built in the last 40 years
Mhm.
for Singaporeans. So the magnitude of what we have to do is we need to build as much as Singapore built, or Hong Kong is about the same number of units, about 1 million units. We have to build what Singapore and Hong Kong built in the last 50 years tomorrow just to catch up. So we should not make the problem small. It is a big problem. And the other situation is density, which Luis brought up earlier. It
Yeah.
is this density or congestion that has led to the vectors of disease and leads to vectors of disease like COVID to be transmitted very fast. Now, there is good congestion and bad congestion, or good density versus bad density. Hong Kong's Mongkok and several
Mm.
districts have densities higher than Tondo. Tondo and Manila have a high density of 70 to 80,000 people per square kilometer, but Mongkok is 120.
Mm.
We have to look at the technical aspect of what they call floor area ratio or plot ratio. Our informal settlers are 1-2 stories high, and you
Mm.
pack this 70,000 at 1 and 2 stories. So there's no space to move around. Your esquinitas and alleys are very tight. That's where the diseases are transmitted.
Yeah.
Versus the medium rise and high rise, high density housing in Hong Kong and Singapore, where they are stacked. So they are above the ground level. They're provided with minimum acceptable space allocations. They have elevators. They have staircases, so they can move around and survive in their units, and are able to avoid contact with neighbors if necessary. And that's how Hong Kong has been able to escape the rapid transmission compared to us here in our informal settlements,
Mhm.
where you are at 1 or 2 story level and the contact is constant. You cannot avoid it, and the chances of transmittal is there. In Singapore, they have similar density levels. So if you look at densities in Singapore and Hong Kong in terms of FAR, floor area ratio,
Mhm.
in Singapore it's 4 to 8 FAR. In Hong Kong, it's all the way upwards of 12. That means you have 20, 30, sometimes even 40-story residential buildings for our social housing estates.
Yeah.
And there's no getting away from going MRB, or medium rise high density, in Metro Manila and Metro Davao Baguio, all the metro areas. The the challenge with the lower density shown here with the 1 or 2 story is that you can never be able to accommodate the population that we have in our informal settlements in just 1 or 2 stories. We cannot get away from government or private development in infusing housing with better infrastructure and more infrastructure. That means we need to go up 8 to 15 stories. When
Mhm.
Singapore and Hong Kong did their emergency housing in the 1950s for Hong Kong and Singapore in the 1960s,
Mhm.
they knew they had to go up, and they went up 10 to 15 stories. And it's emergency housing. It's about 16 or 17 square meters per unit. And they did not even have elevators. 16 stories,
Mhm.
imagine. But they were able to house people with running water and toilets. So sanitation was there. And you could contain vectors of disease. Eventually, they put elevators, which are the most expensive things that you can put into housing. So, but the elevators only stop every 5 or 6 floors.
Yeah.
So you were only within 2 or 3 stories from your floor,
Yeah.
but it reduced the cost of the elevators. Eventually, of course, as housing improved in those two countries, they were able to add floors for the elevators to stop. But that's very technical. There are ways of achieving capacity. We can absorb the 1 million informal settlers here in Manila, but government first. You're correct. Governance. We have to address this as a whole metro region. But there are 17 LGUs in Metro Manila, all with their own housing, as well as national um, agencies like NHA under the DHSUD that do these things only when there are opportunities. I'm sorry, much like Gawad Kalinga has no choice but to look at places where it's possible to build. It has to be a more proactive thing from
What about
government to
yeah?
identify areas to build.
Yeah, what about legislation, Paulo, Luis? Because it seems to me that only when there's a law that requires it will government really do the job. Because like environment, because the Supreme Court issued a decree, you guys clean up the Manila Bay. It's being done.
And the laws are there. I mean, the National Building Code has already set a minimum requirement of 18 square meters for
No, no,
the
no. I mean to build more units. Kasi parang kanya-kanya, Luis.
Yes. So I mentioned breaking that relocation mentality, looking at the poor, equal, and worse. The third point, Sito, I wanted to do is how do we mobilize resources?
Mm.
And yung may mga laws naman talaga ngayon, Sito, that can cross-subsidize itong mga housing na to. For example, lahat na developers are required by law to provide X percent of their
yes,
development
but
costs
they
for
but they there's a loophole that
Yeah.
the law is there, but they twisted the law so that they
so
build that socialized housing
I'm
component
I'm
kilometers
getting there.
away.
I'm getting
Sorry,
there.
Luis.
So that's I share the frustration with Paulo, no? Kasi
Oh,
nandun na eh. Kayang-kaya yan because it cannot just be solved by government, no? Private and
okay.
government, we need to work together. But there are laws that will enable this kind of can fund this kind of direction, no? But also, Sito, I think there has got to be a change in how the law should be crafted. For example,
Mm.
um, how do we fund bridges? How does government fund bridges, roads? Hindi naman tayo nagbabayad dun sa bridges. We have to look at the para gumamit. We have to look at the shelter na parang nagtatayo tayo ng highway, nagtatayo tayo ng infrastructure to capacitate our population. It's an investment of government
Yes.
in its human capital. Who are the
Mm.
poorest? Itong 5 milyon na sinasabi ni Paulo. So,
Okay.
ang problema kasi ngayon, tatayuan natin ng bahay ng gobyerno funded, sisingilin natin, pag hindi makabayad, anong gagawin natin? Paalisin natin? Eh di naging bakante ngayon yung so it's a dilemma. So
Mhm.
kailangan mo na makita natin, ang tatayo ba
Okay.
natin na 16th story, babayaran ba yan o hindi?
Yes.
Kasi yung
Okay.
mga
Let
tao,
let
May
let,
I,
let Paulo
there
let
is
Paulo
there is
comment.
units
oh,
for sale and units for rental. The
Mm.
solution that Hong Kong and Singapore has found was that initially they cannot pay for these units, so it's
Mhm.
heavily subsidized housing for
yes,
rental. Rental
Mm.
housing is one of the key concepts that must be put into the whole socialized housing equation. Eventually, as the economy improves, as people's own economic conditions improve, they will be able to afford it, as what happened in Singapore and Hong Kong eventually. But you have to start with rental housing. There is no getting away from it.
Okay.
Government has to build socialized housing. We cannot push everything to private companies because their
yes.
agenda is profit.
Yeah.
Why government has to provide housing, food, shelter for everyone. They
Paulo,
are yes.
yeah, I'm just curious. Ano yung sinasabi mong may loophole sa batas? Because someone from the NHA tried to send me an email, putol naman. Parang sinasabi nila, oh, there is a law that X% of these developments must be dedicated for the poor.
But
What loophole?
it can be not in the same area. They can identify a place kilometers away, so it defeats the purpose. Now we feel the problem because all our service personnel, our
Mm,
guards, our drivers are kilometers away in informal settlements, not in socialized housing. Or
mm.
if they are in social housing, they have to commute 1 hour before they get to us.
Yeah, because I think COVID-19 basically exposed all of this. First, they couldn't travel because of the quarantine. And then when they could travel, there were no buses available. And then when there were transportations or whatever was available, now there's contamination because a lot of them were coming to Metro Manila or are in Metro Manila in the squatters area or informal settlers at ayan, nahawa na. May mga kaibigan tayo, hindi ko na lang sasabihin we have common friends who just recently got infected with COVID. And when I inquired, where the hell did you get it? You stay at home all the time. Yeah, well, my driver brought it. May tinawagan ako, my driver brought it. So stuff like this. So there are enough laws, you say, both of you gentlemen say there are enough laws. What about the cost? Kasi parang when I look at the construction here, these so-called expensive condominiums, sabi ko, teka, mas housing structure, ano yan, construction method dyan in Singapore, in the Netherlands, and then they peddle it off here as high end. What's the
See,
problem, Luis?
there's a live proof of concept of what Paulo just mentioned about rental housing. No,
Oh,
we're partnering with Valenzuela right now. In fact,
mm-hmm.
we're in the process of and that has been the mode of Valenzuela City rental. So they are in the process of finishing the third with GK. We're building
Mm-hmm.
22 four-story
Uh-huh.
Medium rise.
buildings, medium rise that will house maybe to 900 families. Rental yon. It's not their own. They will pay rent, and that rent, I think, is gonna be used to maintain the
Yeah.
common areas, but it's not really to recover the the
No.
cost of the construction. And
Mhm.
Valenzuela is doing it, Sito. No, they have 3 villages now that are being constructed. So the arrangement is government, the local government Valenzuela purchase the property.
Mhm.
Actually, not purchase, parang kinuha nila dahil hindi nagbabayad ng tax eh. So parang
Okay.
nagkaroon ng arrangement, and then nagtayo kami ng mga bahay.
Okay.
The buildings were funded by a private corporation.
Well,
But this is where the law that Paulo was talking about, yung socialized housing compliance can fund that actually.
okay.
Because
Yeah.
nandun yun, nandun yung pasok ng law na yon. Pag
Mhm.
in-implement, kaso yung loophole na sinasabi ni Paulo, I see that and I share his frustration. May mga provisions din kasi doon na may mga options, Sito. May mga
Yeah.
options na can make it complicated rather than addressing head-on the meager resource that is needed to be mobilized actually.
Okay, GK is already doing its part. You can only do where you're allowed to do, so to speak. Paulo, you're a respected leader in terms of architecture, urban development. What do we need to do? My last question na lang, because we've run out of time. What do we need to do to get this thing, moving forward, get the changes, get the attitude corrected, etc.? What needs to be done to correct this? I'll call it a mortal sin for all intents and
Yeah.
purposes.
Well, the key is access to land. And the first thing I would do, or I would advise government to do, is to conduct an audit of all government lands in Metro Manila. I mean, if you are able to fix governance in Metro Manila as one whole governance, that's why we have a Metro Manila Development Authority, which should have housing under its purview. So we have a lot of government lands, but the problem with our government lands is that we sell it off to private development instead of for all of our social needs. If you look at an aerial map of Manila, an aerial view of Manila, you will see a lot of open spaces, the military camps, some of the hospital areas, the government, especially in Quezon City, and a lot of the land was owned by NHA, but they sold it off. The military camps are sold off. You still have Aguinaldo and Cramia, and these are
Mhm.
areas where you could. And then you have eminent domain, and the government really should consolidate land so you can house people where they need to be housed. You can build the medium to high-rise, high-density buildings. You can provide for the social constructs to align with the physical constructs. You can create communities, but it all needs planning. So you need to plan all of these things as a whole metro region
Should
rather
we
than
Should we bring it down to the local government level, Paulo? Sorry, parang nirefine ko lang yung question ko because I know several provinces, the local government basically went to a bank, borrowed 1 billion and built their hospitals.
Yes, you can do it in the provinces because the problem is not as big. Manila is 10 times bigger than the next metropolitan region, Metro Manila, which is Cebu. So the problems are more solvable at the smaller scale. You have to jump a scale for Metro Cebu and Metro Manila. You cannot do it as small anymore. The problem has to be solved with bold solutions. You will not be able to solve the problems of housing and socialized housing
Okay.
in Metro Manila that way. It has to be bold. It has
Okay.
to be at the level of a war against. If you have war against drugs, we need a war against homelessness.
Okay, well, gentlemen, I hope you understand we have limited time per topic. So, but I do request, please give me another shot at this or continuing discussions on this because I believe we owe it to these people who are serving us, meeting our needs, drivers, workers, staff. We need to help them have proper housing. And I think just between the three of us, we can at least start things going. Thank you very much, and have a good day, gentlemen.
Salamat.
Thank you, Sid.
Thank you.
Thank you, Luis.
Thank you,
Okay.
Paulo.
Thank you, Luis. Thank you, Paulo. And ladies and gentlemen, ayun po, no, I hope you learned a few things. Paulo's inputs were, I think, at this stage in the game, or in this stage of the disaster, let's call it a housing disaster, we can no longer be happy with, sabi nga, medium rise daw, yung 4 stories. Eh sa akin, low rise pa yun eh. That to me is a low rise because I can still walk 4 stories. I think a medium rise would be 10 stories better. We need to go higher. We need to give more space per family. And I think the suggestion that Luis made from Gawad Kalinga is the rental concept. Kasi if we could actually build housing for rent for these people, malaking bagay na because they do pay in one way or another. Alam niyo po, sasabihin natin yung mga squatter, libre. It's not true. Many of them pay token rent because yun ang may nangungulekta. Protection money po yan. May pera para sa kuryente, sa tubig, and sa pwesto. And let's not kid ourselves. And let us not allow this to continue. We'll go for a quick break. When we come back, we will then go to, I think, this issue about medical waste here on Agenda. Okay, you're back here on Agenda. I'm Cito Beltran, and you are watching our program via Signal TV, channels 8 and 250, as well as facebook.com/onenewsph and on YouTube, One News PH. And at this point of the program, let's speak with zero waste campaigner for Greenpeace Southeast Asia, Marian Ledesma, to give us a better understanding of the situation regarding medical waste, because recently the news featured medyo meron pong natagpuan. Usually in the past they would report, oh, a sack with a body or a corpse or mangled parts of a human being was found in the street. Ngayon, hindi na po yun nakikita masyado. I haven't heard that kind of a story, thank God, for quite a while. But now, the big deal is medical waste that, may have fallen off a truck or dumped somewhere. Marian, are you there already?
Hi, good morning, Sita. Yes.
Okay, Marian, thank you for joining us this morning. I just made that intro regarding, a sack of injections, face mask, used linen, etc., that fell off a truck. What is the situation right now as far as the disposal of medical waste products from hospitals in the country?
Well, it's pretty alarming. It's not just coming from medical facilities or clinics, for example. Medical waste and those that are contaminated, for example, PPEs, they're also coming from our households and in the communities. And it's concerning because these are modes of transmission, and they also are causes of environmental destruction and harming our food systems, for example. So when you look at it, we actually have really good precautions or protocols in place to handle medical waste in our hospital facilities. Um, the problem now is about transporting these waste to their final destination, or also dealing with the waste that are coming in from our communities or households. So
Okay. Looking at you, obviously we have a very huge generational gap. You're very young, and the way we did things in my time and the way they do things in your time are two different things. But here's the question: in my time, back then when I was your age, I mean, we simply burned things. Okay, because that's the quickest, easiest, safest way to deal with deal with these products. But nowadays, uh, aren't we still incinerating? Because medical products, from what I understand, Marian, you have to incinerate them.
actually, no, we don't need to do incineration anymore of our medical waste.
Mm-hmm.
Incineration is actually illegal under our Clean Air Act and our Ecological Solid Waste Management Act. So,
Mm-hmm.
what we need to do about these medical wastes isn't to incinerate them, because that would cause further or more public health risks because of all of the negative impacts to health of incineration. What we need to do is, for contaminated waste, what medical experts advise is to isolate them first, make sure that they no longer hold or have any detectable infectious virus on them, and that usually takes a few days. What the WHO recommends is around 72 hours of isolation first before they can
Mm-hmm.
enter our regular or public waste stream.
Okay, so at the end of the day, you collect the medical waste, you bring them to a facility where, you assume, okay, hayaan mo munang maluto yan, hayaan mo sumingaw, maarawan, whatever the process is. And then what? We bury them?
So actually, that's when they can already enter our regular waste stream. So pwede na silang dalhin in places or in facilities or landfills where our community waste or municipal waste already goes to. So as long as mabigyan enough time to isolate it and have make sure that wala nang detectable na virus,
Mhm.
it's actually already all right to mix it with our municipal waste. Of
Is it,
course, with the
yeah.
added condition that just like any waste that comes from our communities, masegregate ito ng maayos.
Okay, but you said the magic word, Marian, because we may segregate in the hospital, but do we actually have? And I tell you, I have not seen one single example of it. Do we actually have a special collection for medical waste? Kasi parang okay, yung basurero, it's bad enough. The homeowners don't segregate. When the basureros come, they go, we don't have time for this because COVID-19 nga, we want to get this collection over and done with. And then now we're talking about medical waste. And I'm like, sino kumokolekta ng medical waste?
Yeah, that's the sad thing actually, Sito, about our waste management systems, because we
Mhm.
have really good laws that and protocols for solid waste management, ensuring infectious or hazardous waste is separated. Pero yung implementation at yung enforcement, ang parang may gap tayo doon, and that's what we need to bridge, because even those households that segregate and those hospital facilities that segregate and make sure that their infectious waste is properly separated, nangyayari minsan pag upon collection or upon taking them to all of these landfills or facilities where the waste will be processed, nawawala na yung segregation process. And I think it's a
Mhm.
frustration of many Filipinos, kasi if nagsisegregate sila pero nakikita nila na na-pick up and minsan na may mix lang, parang nawawalan rin sila ng gana to segregate at home.
Yeah. So, what are your concerns now as a coordinator, campaigner, and what are your recommendations? Because clearly, we have to suggest to local government, DILG, and legislators to come up with a law that there should be a dedicated medical waste collection team para alam natin na itong grupo lang na ito ang kumukuha ng basura na yan at least hindi bara-bara kung saan tinatapon. What other recommendations do you have?
Yeah, so actually that's a good idea to always have people who are dedicated and assigned to help with the segregation. For other than that, what Greenpeace also recommends is that people and the government should be supporting or endorsing the use of reusables. So when I say reusables, it's reusable personal protective equipment, or it can also be reusable products. And I know there have been always questions or fears around using reusables because marami tayong regulations na nagsasabi disposable plastic na lang or surgical or medical grade masks na lang yung gamitin or latex gloves, for example. Pero there's actually a lot of reports and scientific data that supports the use of reusables. A few months ago, 130 health experts actually signed or endorsed the support of reusables for the general public. So hindi to yung mga healthcare settings, pero the average person should be using reusable masks and reusable gloves just because this can actually significantly lessen yung medical waste natin. And it also protects our waste collectors and waste pickers from having to deal with disposable na PPEs that are potentially contaminated.
You know, I don't know if this should be a question or a suggestion, but has Greenpeace undertaken any research or experiments regarding, reusable or reprocessing reusable? Because like PPEs, for instance, I mean, they cost a fortune. And when I talk to some of my mad scientist friends and engineering buffs, we all came to the conclusion that if you actually put all of this stuff and expose them to ultraviolet and steam, etc., you can really kill anything that's on those PPEs and reuse those PPEs. Pero parang there is a fear that the economics, the profit on PPEs is so much that some people don't even want to consider this concept of reusables.
So actually, we've already seen a lot of studies showing that scientists have seen that cloth masks or cloth as a material, for example, actually has a shorter time of holding the virus as compared to, for example, plastic material or stainless steel. Yung maganda sa reusables is that they were designed to be cleaned or sanitized and repeatedly used. So, for example, cloth masks or reusable gloves, these are built or made just so we can sanitize and disinfect them easily, and also just with things like soap and water or regular household disinfectants. So that's something that we want to recommend. Say these face masks also cost-effective rin siya sa mga tao. One of the health experts that we talked to here in the Philippines actually suggested it, and one of the reasons was that it's a practical solution for most people. A lot of our communities can't afford to keep on buying surgical masks on a daily basis. Pero if they have fabric masks or usable gloves, these can actually just be disinfected with regular soap and water, just like we would any of our clothes.
Well, that's good to know because some people say I'm crazy, but when the pandemic started, when the quarantine started, I actually asked a friend abroad to bring me a box of face masks. And then someone gave me a box of face masks. Sabi, Kuyang, you're one of the critical groups. So here's a box. And awa ng Diyos, hindi ko pa nagagamit because that's exactly what I do with my first batch of face masks. I actually wash them. Tinututbrush ko pa, ginagamitan ko ng detergent. So I have no problems washing them, and it's a good idea. And the thing you mentioned about gloves, I can't understand for the life of me. I mean, we all use these kitchen and toilet gloves if we need to handle something dirty, something chemical. But when people go out, parang passionista na gumamit ng mga surgical gloves. And parang sabi ko, sige, gawa pa kayo ng basura. In any case, so what else, Marian?
So yeah, other than that, of course, we want to make sure that people are protected, and there are also other measures. For example, may pre-existing na kasi na mga guidelines and protocols or regulations around food safety and health and sanitation and food establishments. So
Hmm.
it's a concern, for example, and people are actively using mga plastic spoons and forks. And
Yeah.
that's actually, when you look at it, meron ng existing na regulations around food safety, which require them to disinfect and sanitize all of these utensils. So we have to just make sure that we're following the health guidelines that are already built in place. At the same
Mhm.
time, I think importante rin our communities are taught the proper use of these reusable face masks, made sure that they have the information to disinfect them and or to sanitize their houses, for example. I think information really is power in this case, because a lot of people sometimes, there's this false sense of security because the pandemic has been going on for so long na people sometimes forget. And I think it's important na they're really informed, and
Yeah.
they really maintain things like, for example, hygiene and social distancing. Minsan nakakalimutan na because of just how long this has been going on. And those are actually more important than PPEs, because when you really think about it, social distancing is so vital, because how the infection or the virus is spread through aerosol droplets.
Okay, well, I guess the best thing that I got out of this discussion, or the best two things I got out of this discussion, is that there is really a need for local governments to establish a dedicated collection system for medical waste para nate-trace, natatrack. Kasi the sad part about it, the sad reality is we have kalkals, mga kalaykay, hukay people in the dump sites, and you don't know if they get infected, how they got infected. Kasi kung alam natin saan pumupunta yung medical waste, we can do contact tracing as well. And then also this thing about reusable. Well, anyway, thank you, Marian. I hope that our viewers become more conscious about their own medical waste that they create, such as face masks and tissue paper, kasi marami po, no? Mag,
Yes.
gagamit ng tissue, lalagay dun sa kotse, dun sa bag, pagkatapos itatapon din, and they don't realize that they could be COVID positive, or the friends who are COVID positive doing that as well. Thank you very much, Marian.
Thank you.
Okay, that's Marian Ledesma. She is a the zero waste campaigner for Greenpeace Southeast Asia, and it's very encouraging to see young people already being in the forefront, being highly visible and speaking. So, kung kayo po, no, please don't think only in terms of hospitals. All of us create waste. All of us create the medical waste because of our face mask. That's a medical waste. Yung gloves po ninyo na saucy, na pagpunta ninyo ng supermarket, magla-gloves kayo. Ako, construction gloves na lang, talo-talo pa. Diba? But in any case, make it reusable. Wag po disposable, because you add to the waste. And if you have tissue and all that stuff, medyo itali naman ninyo, lagay ninyo medical waste para hindi delikado yung mga nagkakalkal na mga kawawang kapatid natin. Okay, we'll go for a break, and when we return, we will heto na, mga plantitos at plantitas, pag-usapan natin ang inyong halamanan dito sa agenda. Thank you. We'll be right back. Okay, welcome back to Agenda. And before we go to the favorite topic of plantitos and plantitas, please allow me to just acknowledge Mr. Butch Chase of Puerto Princesa. Yung mga bata sa inyo, hindi nyo na matatandaan siguro si Butch Chase. But kaming mga medyo seniorly na, kilabot po. Kilabot yang si Butch Chase. He is a well-known competitive motorcycle rider in his time, and he was a feared rider pagdating sa mga competition, mga motocross, etc. And Butch Chase actually called me the last week, hindi ko lang naalala, and he said, Cito, yung panahon natin, yung sinasabi nilang e-scooter ngayon, nung panahon natin in the 70s, 60s and 70s, hindi siya electric, siya ay mechanical. In other words, the padjak, no? And I said, I don't remember what they were called. And he told me, don't you remember they were called trolleys? Weird, no? Kasi trolley ngayon, hinihila. Nung panahon namin, trolley, sinisikad o sinisipa to move on. And he mentioned, because I mentioned the name Arcegas, okay? Sabi niya, natatandaan mo ba yung presyo? Hindi. 19 pesos and 95 centavos. Ngayon, commercial na lang ang makikita mo tungkol sa 20 pesos. Okay, let's go on to our next topic. We bring to you an urban gardener and a journalist who will soon have a program on One News PH. And pag-usapan natin itong plantitos and plantitas. Mr. Layson ba o Layson? Good morning.
Yes, good morning, Cito. Good morning sa lahat ng viewers ng Agenda dito sa Signal TV Channel 1.
Okay. Nasaan ka ba? Ba't naging Channel 1 ka? Nasaan ka ba?
Signal TV tayo,
okay.
Cito.
Hindi, akala ko. Kasi alam ko, marami ng stations yung TV5. Baka ako nasa probinsya ka, no? In any case, the reason I asked the team to contact someone like you, kasi maraming mga plantitos and plantitas ngayon na bili ng halaman. And sabi ko, ayan na, dyan magsisimula yung sunugan ng pera. Because many people buy plants and they don't know the first thing about plants. Kasi may mga madaling alagaan at may sukdulan ng hirap buhayin. Could you please give our viewers, tips and ideas about this problem?
Yes, Cito. Kung makikita ng ating mga viewers, dito sa ating background ay napakaraming bote. May mga tanim na halaman. Majority ng mga tanim ko, kasamang Cito, ay mga green leafy vegetable. So ito'y nakakain na natin kagad, ano? Ang pinakamadali pong itanim, gaya ng tanong mo kanina kasi ito, yung kangkong at kamote. Kapag ikaw ay namalengke, bibili tayo ng talbos ng kamote. Ang haba ng talbos ng kamote at ng kangkong nasa 2 dangkal yan, ano? Ang gagamitin lang natin yung talbos at yung kanyang sariwang daon. So anong gagawin natin doon sa stock? So yun na, doon papasok yung pagtatanim natin na pinakamadali sa mga pet bottle na self-watering. Ano? Ilagay nyo lang po, pwede nyo pong ilagyan lang ng lupa yung pet bottle na yan at tutubo na ng kusa. Ano? At kapag ito'y, ang kagandaan nito kasi ito, all year round, meron kang ina-harvest na kangkong at talbos ng kamote. Ganon din yung alokbati at ang saluyot. Napakadali pong itanim yan. At ang maganda rin mga itinatanim ngayon, yung pechay, lettuce, ano? Napakamahal po ng lettuce.
Sandali, nabanggit mo yung saluyot. Busit na busit ako dyan sa saluyot na yan kasi ang hirap malaman kung alin ang saluyot at alin yung marijuana Kasi sabi ko, ano ba yung saluyot? Ano ba forma niyang saluyot na yan? Kasi hindi ba yung dahon niya parang dahon din ng marijuana? Sabi ko, oy, baka may tumubong marijuana dito. Hindi sir, saluyot ho yan. Ano ba paano ba kinakain yung saluyot na yan?
Isinasawag ito sa mga ginisa, ano, dinengdeng, yung mga kapatid natin dyan sa bandang Pangasinan. Nakapakasarap nito. Kapag kinain mo to kasi ito, yung madulas siya, ano? Alos kamukha siya ng alokbati. Parang okra, yung alokbati. Ganyan siya, ano? Pero napakaraming taglay na health benefits sa ating katawan, ano? Anti-cancer po yung mga yan. Kaya napakadali din patubuhin. Stock din siya, no? Itatanim yung kanyang natitirang tangkay na nasa bandang ilalim, ibaon nyo lang po yan sa lupa at dinidilig araw-araw. Pero yung pamamaraan ko, hindi po kailangan diligin araw-araw dahil self-watering Mamaya magde-demo po tayo ng paggawa ng bote na self-watering para sa ating mga viewers kasi ito. So yun po, yun ang napakadali pong itanim ng mga yan. Yung okra, napakadali rin pong alagayin, yung sitaw, yung talong, ano? At sili, napakamahal po ng sili. Alam, minsan sumapit dito sa ating bansa, mapapamura ka sa sobrang mahal ng sili. Magtanim na lang po tayo sa ating garden. Kagaya po natin kinalalagyan ngayon kasi ito, ano? Ako po nasa Paco, Maynila. Along the way po ito, may mga sasakyan pong dumadaan dito sa aking harapan. Second floor and third floor ko po. Ito po kung nakikita po ninyo. Second floor, third floor po yan, ano? May tanim. Ang dami po nating tanim, mga bautin pong ganyan. Meron po akong mga 300 bottles, ano? Na ganyang nakasabit lang siya, may iba't ibang uri ng halaman. So ginagawa po natin ito, self-watering. Nang sa ganon ay pwede kang umalis dahil reporter tayo kasi ito, police beat reporter tayo, so umalis tayo. Hindi naman natin kailangan madiligan yung ating mga halaman araw-araw. So naisip ko gumawa ng self-watering nang sa ganon kahit na hindi mo madilig 1 hanggang 2 araw, 3 araw ay buhay na buhay pa rin ang iyong mga halaman.
Kasi yung aking Chinese bamboo, minumura ako niyan miya't-maya dahil nakakalimutan ko siya na hindi diligan ng 1 linggo. So yung self-watering system mo, ginagamit mo yung bote ng soft drinks, pinuputol, tapos tinataob yung dulo.
Yes, binabaligtad ko to kasi ito, ano, nilalagyan ko lang ng parang drainage niya, ano? Lagusan ng tubig. Kapag diniligan mo, kahit sobra yung tubig na naidilig mo, bababa doon sa ilalim, ano? Parang magkakaroon siya ng water reserve, ano? Kaya kahit iwan mo yung halaman mo, mabubuhay po siya. Yes po.
Yung kinikwento mo, puro gulay. Meron pa bang yung mga halaman, yung mga alam mo kasi marami ako nakita, binibili kung ano-anong mga ornamental plants. Anong masasabi mo tungkol doon?
Well, sa akin lang kasi ito, dapat ay yung mga green leafy vegetables ang ating itanim sa ngayon. Dahil napakahirap pong mamalengke, pupunta ka sa palengke, ay kung meron kang sariling tanim, makakasigurado ka yung pagkain mo ay ligtas. Ano? Ito yung nakikita ko kasi ito, nasagot sa posibleng na maranasang kagutuman. Marami nang nagugutom ngayon sa ating mga kababayan. Kaya nag-i-encourage ako, magtanim tayo mga green leafy vegetables, mga herbs, ano, bawang, luya, napakadali pong itanim at ang sibuyas. So, ano po natin yan? Regular po natin ginagamit yan araw-araw.
Uy, tigil-tigilan mo nga ako. Madaling magtanim ka mo ng bawang. Baka murahin ka ng mga Ilocano. Hindi ba kailangan na nandun sa bukid ka nagtatanim ng bawang?
Meron po akong bawang ngayon dito kasi kukunin ko lang siya, ano, nasa bote.
Nasa bote?
Makikita po, opo, nasa bote po siya, kukunin ko po siya kasi
Oo, oo. Ayan, mga kaibigan.
So ito po, kikita niyo po, ano? So dito lang kasi
Oo.
ito lang daon na ito, ano ka na eh, pwede ka nang gamitin mo na ito ng panggisa. Ano? Pwede na
Ah,
yan, bawang po yan, makikita niyo po.
mhm.
Ano pa lang po ito, nasa 25 days. So ma-harvest na ako dito. Kapag in-harvest mo ito kasi
Oo.
gugupit ka lang nitong kanyang daon. So yung
Oo.
mismong daon yan, pwede na yang pangsahog sa ating mga ginisa. So
Mhm.
simple lang po, sa self-watering. Meron po tayong luya diyan at
Mhm.
meron tayong
Paano mo ba tinanim yung bawang mo na yan? Kasi ako, ang dami ko pang pinanood na YouTube na kaya kung ano-ano, na sabi, meron pa yung ilagay mo yung puwet ng bawang sa may tubig para mag-rooting, nabulok. Ang mahal-mahal pa naman ng bawang Ilocano. Yung sa'yo, ano ba yan? Buong bulb o pira-piraso lang na tinatanim mo sa lupa?
pira-piraso siya, no? May isang bulb ka,
Mhm.
pag-iwa-iwalayin mo 'yon. Piliin mo yung mga malalaki. Piliin mo yung
Ah,
malalaki tapos ibaon mo yung dulo niya. O ibabad mo muna mga 5 hours sa tubig. Nang sa ganoon yung ugat niya sa ilalim
hmm,
mabubuhay, ano? Tapos
hmm,
ibaon mo lang yan sa lupa. Ibaon mo yan sa lupa. Matagal
hmm,
lang siyang tumubo, ano? Nasa 15 days. So kung medyo naiinip ang iba, ba't hindi tumutubo? Nasa 15
hmm,
to 20 days bago siya umusbong, lalabas yung kanyang magge-germinate, ano? So ganun
hmm.
po ay yung bawang at saka hindi po siya matubig. Ang pagkakamali po ng iba, dilig sila ng dilig, so mamamatay po siya. At marami pong pagkakamali dito sa Metro Manila kasi ano, yung ito
Nagpapata nagpapatama ka yata pare, gusto mo putulan na kita ng programa. Yun. Yun,
opo,
totoo yun. Dilig ng dilig, sakit. Yung sa'kin naman nagkamali ako, nilabas ko dun sa may arawan, umulan naman ng umulan, nagkabulukan lahat. Hmm.
ayun. So
Yung
ang
sa'yo
marami pa, yes po.
yung sa'yo ano, parang may bubong sa ibabaw yung mga halaman mo, hindi kailangan ng, nasa open air. Puwedeng yan, balkonahe yan sa'yo, hindi ba?
Balko na ito kasi ano, shading ako, shading. Ang
Okay.
araw ay pupuwedeng nasisikatan ng araw ito sa
Mm,
umaga, ano? Pagsapit
mm,
ng mga bandang 2:00, 3:00, ano na, lilim na ito. So gano'n po, ano? Ang
okey.
halaman kailangan din po niya kailangan po number 1 po niyang kailangan ay ang araw, sikat ng araw. At
Mhm.
gusto ko lang bigyang point ito, kasama ko sito, ang daming nagtatanong sa akin, "Ber, bumili
Oh,
ako ng halaman, napakaganda. Binili ko, napakamahal. Tapos
oh.
inuwi ko sa bahay, naalagaan ko naman." Sabi na, dinidiligan ko. Pero unti-unti siyang nanilawat na matay. Ang
Hmm,
pagkakamali po nila, sabi ko, "Ano bang dinidiligan mo? Anong ginagamit mong tubig?" Di kumukuha ko sa poso, dinidiligan ko, sabi nila. So mali po yan, sabi ko. Number 1 po, yung pong tubig na nakukuha po natin dito sa Metro Manila na dumadaan sa ating mga poso, may chlorine po yan. May chlorine.
sa
Kapag po yan ay
gripo,
dinilig
sa
mo,
gri
opo,
gripo kamo, gripo, okey.
yes po, sa
Oh,
mga poset po natin, ano? May
oh,
chlorine po yan na galing po sa Nawasa, galing sa Maynilad. Kapag po yan
hmm,
ay dinilig mo sa halaman, kinuha mo, dinilig mo direkta kagad sa halaman, unti-unti pong mamamatay, papangitan yung halaman, maninilaw, hanggang tuluyan po siyang malalanta. So yun po yung pagkakamali. Siguro po pwede nating bigyan na kagad na tip yan sa ating mga viewers dito sa agenda kasamang Sito. Dapat po, ito po yung dapat natin gawin. Dapat
hmm,
po, yung tubig na yan, kunin nyo ngayong araw, ilagay niyo po sa timba, pasisingawin niyo po yan ng magdamag. Ano? Magdamag po. Nang sa ganon yung pong chlorine niya ay mawawala o mag-evaporate po yan, matatanggal. That's time,
hmm,
pwede na po siyang pandilig. So hindi po pwedeng direkta kagad. Kumuha ka ngayon, idinilig mo kagad. So hindi po pwede yung ganon. Yun po yung number ang pagkakamali ng marami
hmm.
pong nagtatanim ngayon, urban gardening dito sa Metro Manila. Sana nakapag-share tayo, ano, kasamang Sito. Yun po yung number 1 na pagkakamali nila.
Oh, number 1 yung, using chlorinated water directly and, out of the faucet. Number 2, overwatering yung kanilang mga halaman. Number 3,
Yes.
pina-prioritize yung ornamental. Actually, hindi mo lang natanong, no? Pero may sinusulat akong column ngayon na ang title, Pretty will not feed you. Kasi, di ba, bili ka ng bili, pretty plants, pretty this, pretty that. Hindi mo naman makain. tapos aalagaan mo pa, tapos pag diniligan mo ng tubig na galing sa nawasa, mamamatay din. O ano pang mga tips mo dyan, pare ko?
Yes. Tayo po ay nagtuturo din ng yung soil paano natin mapaganda kasamang Sito, no?
Oo.
Ito napaka-basic na ito, no? Yung sa waste lang po natin kapag po tayo kumain, bumili tayo po ng saging, yung pong balat, madalas ay tinatapon po ninyo, no? Huwag niyo pong
Oo.
itapon 'yan. Huwag niyo pong itapon 'yan. Ibabad niyo lang po 'yan sa tubig, ano? After 24 hours po, ipandilig po ninyo. Kinabukasan ipandilig po ninyo sa mga halaman ninyo na malapit nang mamulaklak at kasalukuyang namumulaklak. Nang sa ganon, yung lahat ng ibinulaklak ay magsisilbing bunga. Alam mo kasama Sito, may mga tanim ako dito. Sa ngayon, habang nag-uusap tayo, ano, yung aking tanim na sili, una ko lang hinarvestan ito. Napakaraming bunga nung unang hinarvest ko. Dahil sa ating ginagawa, yung po kasing balat ng saging, napakataas po ng kanyang potassium. Kahit po sa tao, mataas po yung potassium. Ano? So yung
Oh.
potassium po, nagsisilbing foliar yan sa ating mga laman, pampabulaklak, at nang sa ganun ay lahat ng ibinulaklak ay magsisilbing bunga. Babalikan ko
Okay.
yung aking sili, ano? Inarbasan ko na, ang dami ko nang nakuha. Ngayon, dahil sa aking patuloy na pagdidilig ng mga foliar fertilizer, na sarili natin, ituturo natin sa mga susunod na mga round sa ating programa kasamang Sito, ano? Sa masaganang buhay. Kung paano pa natin mapapabunga sa ikalawang pagkakataon. Habang kausap ko ngayon, napakaraming panibagong bulaklak yung aking sili na inarbesan ko na.
Gamit mo yung balat lang ng saging na binabad sa tubig?
Balat ng saging o kaya po yung ito madalas po natin sa palengke, pwede kayo bumili at sa paligid po natin yung pong daon ng malunggay. Yung pong daon ng malunggay, kapag po yan ay pinerment mo, kumuha ka lang po ng daon ng malunggay, ano? Ipe-ferment mo po, kailangan i-ferment mo siya ng magdamag, ano? Kinabukasan yung pong siyempre po yung katas po niyan pupunta doon sa tubig na ginamit mo. Yun po ang dapat nating ipandilig. At siyempre po, gumagawa po rin po tayo ng insect repellent. Kapag po marami na kayong mga tanim, sigurado, natitiyak ko, may mga papasok pong mga insekto. So tayo po ay nagtuturo din ng paggawa ng OHN kung tawagin naming nag-organic. Ito ay ang pinagsama-samang bawang, sibuyas, sili, molasses, ano? Pinepermon po ito into 1 week at gagamitin. Nang sa ganon, i-spray po yan once a week. Nang sa ganon, hindi po tayo hindi lalapitan ng mga insekto at iba pong naninira sa ating mga laman.
Totoo yan sinabi mo kasi ako, nang nagsimula itong pandemic na ito, inayos ko na yung aking roof garden, vegetable garden. Nagtanim ako ng siguro mga 20 puno ng talong yun doon sa taas. Nakaano rin ako doon sa plastic na yung bote ba ng drink mineral water. Yung pala, naggawa lang ako ng buffet salad para sa mga tinamaan ng lintik na mga caterpillar. Ano tawag nun sa Tagalog? Yung caterpillar, ano? Yung nangangain ng dahon, tama yan, tinuturo mo na yan. Kasi maraming Pilipino, pupunta, bibili ng mga dilatang insecticide. Hindi nila alam, nako, napatay mo nga yung caterpillar, pero miyat-miya, masusunog naman yung dahon ng halaman. Okay.
At isa pa kasi ito, siyempre yung kapag kinain natin yung bunga, so hindi healthy sa ating katawan. Kaya ang tinuturo natin ay natural.
Okay, Mer, naubusan na tayo ng oras. Alam mo naman, ganyan ang buhay sa broadcasting. Kailan ba mag-uumpisa yung programa mo dito sa One News PH?
Yes, magsisimula na po sa October 11, araw ng linggo. Abangan nyo po, ano? Alas 7 hanggang alas 8 ng umaga. At ito ay masaganang buhay, ano? Masaganang buhay. Hatid ko rito, kasamang Sito, ang do-it-yourself na tips sa tamang pag-aalaman at mga sikreto, ano? At kung paano ang mga health benefits tinanim natin, tatalakayin natin yung mga yan. At kung paano hindi tayo lapitan nga ng mga insekto at kung paano tayo mag-fertilize, magdilig sa ating mga laman, gagawa po tayo ng mga matatabang lupa. Nang sa ganoon, lahat ng ating itinatanim ay mamumulaklak, mamumunga at ating mapapakinabangan.
Okay, thank you very much, Mer. At paano ba yung pilido mo? Layson o Layson?
Layson kasi ito, ano, isang lehitimong magsasaka mula sa Pampanga. Yung pagsasaka sa probinsya, dinala ko dito sa Metro Manila. Ngayon ay nagtuturo tayo ng urban gardening kasamang Sito.
Pareho na tayo. Okay, maraming salamat, Mer, and good luck on your program. Sana ay marami ang manood at marami silang matutunan. Thank you very much and God bless you, Mayor.
Thank you very much po. Maraming salamat. Stay safe. God bless us all.
Okay, yan po si Mayor Layson, and he will have a program on One News PH, and I actually got to see his video a few months before, and I found it interesting because he has a balcony. May balkonahe, dalawang palapag, 2 stories, 2 floors, and pinuno niya talaga ng halaman. Eh ako yung balkonahe ko, ibang nakalagay, kasi yung aking pong bahay fronting west. So pagdating ng hapon, no choice, nung lote. Pagdating ng hapon, napakalakas ng init ng araw, ng sinag ng araw. The sun just really hits us hard. And we spent so much money putting up reflective glass, etc., curtains. Bandang huli, alam nyo kung ano yung nakasolve? Bumili ako yung tinatawag nilang millionaire's vine or buhok ni Marian. Pinatubo ko dun sa floor, pinaakyat ko hanggang dun sa 4th floor, pagkatapos inilaglag ko pababa. Ngayon, malamig na yung araw, natabunan na yung tanawin, kasi kung puro bubong naman ang makikita mo sa kapitbahay, okay na yung may mga dahon-dahon na nakikita mo, pumapasok yung mga ibon, and best of all, we have a cool house. Cool. And then, takot pa yung mga ibang tao. Sabi nila, naku, mukhang maraming mumu dyan. Parang puro bagging kasi. You don't see a building. You literally just see from the 4th floor down, just a cascade of leaves and vines. Hindi naman po masama tingnan. In fact, a lot of people have, in fact, recently, yung aking supplier ng sealant para sa aquarium, si Gino, nang hingi ng cuttings. Mabilis patubuin. And a lot of people don't realize all you have to do is manage plants, and plants can be a blessing to you. Manage them well, and do take care of them, trim them, fertilize them, and they will give you a lot of benefits. We get insulation, we get green, etc. So that's all we have for today. It's been a good week, and we want to thank you for joining us here on Agenda. And for those who have been sending messages to encourage us, thank you very much for your encouragement, for your tips. And may God bless you. Please take care of your family. And last na lang po, no? Please, kung kahapon sinabi ko, aslagaan nyo yung mga babae, mga tumutulong, mga housekeeper, bigyan nyo naman ng konting pansin si Papa. Okay? Kasi mga lalaki, they don't speak much, they don't express kasi they want to be strong. But you know, they need encouragement. They need so much encouragement. They need love, karinyo. Magbigay naman kayong karinyo kasi malaking bagay po yung para sa aming mga lalaki, sa aming mga ama ng pamilya. Okay, thank you very much. And that's Agenda for today.